What's up, guys? Welcome to the line change. And in this video, we're going to be going over a Canucks trade pitch that manages to land them their coveted second line center that they have been so desperately needing, and their second line center that they've not been able to land so far. Obviously, a lot of names have been thrown out there, the likes of Pavel Zacha, Casey Middlestat, Mason McTavish, and the person that we're going to be talking about in this video, Marco Rossi. I know what a lot of Canucks fans are probably saying. Really, we're going over Marco Rossi again? Like, the Canucks already shot their shot at Marco Rossi, and the Minnesota Wild said no. Well, this was months ago. Well, at least a month and a half ago or so, when they actually made the trade. It was prior to the NHL draft. Obviously, in that trade, or that trade offer, I should say, they offered their first round pick in this year's draft, which ended up being Braden Coots. And obviously, there was that rumor that the roster player that the Canucks offered to the Wild was Dakota Joshua, who they ended up actually trading to the Toronto Maple Leafs. But I wanted to go over this as it's an intriguing pitch, and after I read the article, I'll give you guys my thoughts and whether or not I would actually do this trade if I were the Vancouver Canucks. But before we do that, I want to quickly give a shout out to my sponsor, Gassy Jack Art, maker of that incredible artwork you see behind me, and you guys can check him out yourselves at gassjackart.com. I have a link to his website in the description down below. You guys can also check him out on Instagram at GassJackArt. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and dive into this article. Excuse me. It's on heavy.com, so a website that I am not too familiar with, but I was, scouring on Google looking for some Canuck news, and this popped up. So I thought it was interesting, especially after I read it and saw the actual trade pitch itself. Now, this article is called Canucks Trade Pitch Finally Lands Legit Second Line Center. I will leave a link to this article in the description down below so you guys can take a read for yourselves. The Vancouver Canucks know what's missing from their lineup: a second line center, someone who can drive offense and anchor the middle of the ice while taking pressure off Elias Pettersson. But with the calendar ticking toward the new season, the window to fix that hole is closing fast. However, recent reports suggest that discussions could be taking place between the Vancouver Canucks and the Minnesota Wild over a possible trade involving restricted free agent Marco Rossi. According to NHL insider Frank Zaravelli, an offer earlier this summer that included Vancouver's first-round draft pick was rejected by the Wild, but as long as the lines of communication remain open, a deal can still be reached. And Heavy.com would like to help putting forth a proposal that sends winger Niels Höglander, rising center prospect Aatu Räty, and a 2026 second-round pick to Minnesota for Marco Rossi. The number 9 overall pick in 2020, Rossi has quietly evolved into a two-way center with offensive chops and defensive responsibility. He scored 24 goals with 36 assists in 82 games last season. While he is on the smaller side at 5'9", 182 pounds, Rossi has used his excellent hockey sense and IQ to develop as an outstanding playmaker who can create offense in the tough areas. However, Minnesota faces a dilemma. Rossi is reportedly seeking a contract in the neighborhood of 7 years, $49 million, but Wild general manager Bill Guerin is known to take a conservative approach when it comes to the team's budget. Guerin also has the upcoming free agency of superstar Kirill Kaprizov in 2026 to consider, and with talks on Rossi's next contract appearing to have stalled, perhaps the Wild will look to cash in now and get assets ready to contribute both immediately as well as in the future. Now, of course, everyone knows, or if you don't know, basically the Minnesota Wild and Marco Rossi's camp have not spoken since early June. So there has been no communication, no talks, no nothing. between the two sides since June. We're like 15 days into August, and there's been no communication between the two. The season starts in a couple months. Training camp, at least for the Canucks anyway, is less than 6 weeks away. So time is running out, and Marco Rossi technically still doesn't have a contract for this upcoming season, which is where the trade pitch from Vancouver would come into play. Höglander, a 24-year-old winger, brings NHL experience, energy, and a solid scoring touch. He logged 25 points last year after earning 36 the season before, and he fits the mold of a versatile, hard-working forward. Ratu, still developing, is a promising center prospect who impressed with his poise and skill in the AHL last season. And a second-round pick in 2026 adds an element of future value to sweeten the deal. Adding Marco Rossi would give the Vancouver Canucks a nice complement to Elias Pettersson. For the Canucks, this package balances the need to add a key piece down the middle while not sacrificing too much of their young talent base. Rossi's style complements Elias Pettersson nicely, a reliable two-way center who can take tough defensive draws and also drive offense. With the Western Conference tightening and the Canucks eager to advance beyond recent playoff frustrations, adding Rossi could be the push that they need. The Wild, meanwhile, would get a ready-now winger to slot into their top six, a high-upside center prospect who could emerge in a couple of years, and a valuable draft pick to reload their pipeline. It's a trade that blends the present as well as the future. Of course, nothing is guaranteed. Minnesota's willingness to move a player of Rossi's talent hinges on contract talks and the team's own timeline. Vancouver's appetite to part with both Höglander and Ratu, along with a valuable pick, depends on its confidence that Rossi can fill a glaring roster hole. But as a thought experiment, this package makes plenty of sense. It respects the realities of both rosters while offering an intriguing path forward for two teams looking to balance competitiveness with long-term growth. Sometimes the best deals start with a bold idea. So that is the article on heavy.com. Once again, I will leave a link to it in the description down below. Now, when it comes to the actual trade pitch, I'm quite intrigued. So obviously, it would involve, as we mentioned, Nils Höglander and Aatu Räty as being the two main pieces, along with a 2026 second-round pick. I'll admit, I'm a little torn on especially the fact that Nils Höglander is involved in this trade package. I'm a big fan and big supporter of Nils Höglander. I don't know why. I've just always liked him. Obviously, he plays really well with Elias Pettersson, and Pettersson himself has admitted that he enjoys playing with Hoggy, and I just would hate to lose a player like that. Obviously, last season, Höglander was not as good as he was the year before, and did not play well during at least the first half of the season. Towards the end of the season, obviously, Höglander started to come around a lot more and was showing some promise before he was injured in that very same game that Elias Pettersson was injured against the New York Rangers, and it really halted his momentum. Now, as far as Ratu is concerned, obviously, that's another one. I've someone else who I've grown very, very fond of. Obviously, with the departure of Pius Suter, you are kind of relying heavily on Aatu Räty to fill in that third line center role, especially with Suter gone. A lot of people are seeing Räty as the not necessarily successor for Pius Suter, but basically his replacement. Now, obviously, we don't know if the Minnesota Wild would actually go for this trade if the Canucks were to offer it to them. Then again, we don't know if it's tickling their fancy or not. But I do know that Minnesota wants a center in return. If they were to trade Marco Rossi, they would be getting one in Aatu Räty. And of course, they would get a top six NHL ready player in Nils Höglander. Now, I know what some people might be thinking. If the rumors are true and that the Canucks offered the their first-round pick along with Dakota Joshua, why would the Minnesota Wild say yes to Niels Höglander and Aatu Räty for Marco Rossi? What's the difference between Dakota Joshua and Aatu Räty? Well, obviously Joshua is a lot older than Räty, and I would say that Aatu Räty has a lot more upside than Dakota Joshua did. And you're getting a guy who is an absolute menace when it comes to faceoffs. Obviously, Joshua is more so a winger than a center. So they would be getting a center in return for Marco Rossi, and they'd get a guy like Aatu Räty who has a lot of promise. So now I want to ask you, the people, the fans, what do you guys think about this trade pitch involving the Minnesota Wild and the Vancouver Canucks? Would you trade Niels Höglander and Aatu Räty for Marco Rossi to finally fill that second line center role, or second line center position rather? And would you give up Höglander and Räty as well as a second round pick for Rossi? Or do you guys think that's an overpay for Marco Rossi? Are you like some Canuck fans who you're just off the Marco Rossi train? You're over it. You're done with it. It's in the garbage. No point in continuing to bring it up. But as I've said countless times on this channel, I'm a big Marco Rossi guy, and I don't think I'll ever get off that train, as I really want Marco Rossi to be a Vancouver Canuck. And I do feel as though he would really help this team. Obviously, people are concerned about his size, him playing behind Petey, and obviously people are concerned about, him in the playoffs. Can he contribute in the playoffs? Obviously, this past season, he ended up being demoted to the fourth line in the playoffs, but I still don't understand that that decision by the Wild. You want the guy to contribute in the playoffs, and yet you put him on the fourth line. If you're playing on the fourth line, you're not going to produce in the playoffs. And Rossi also doesn't have a whole lot of playoff experience. Keep in mind, he's only been in the league for 5 years now, and over those 5 years, how many times has the Wild been in the playoffs? I don't have the number right off the top of my head, but he's it's one playoff run that he obviously did not do well in, but there's always next year, there's always the year after that. Once he gets more experience, obviously he will be better, especially if he is playing where he should be. So once again, let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think about this trade pitch that helps land the Vancouver Canucks their second line center. Now, of course, if this trade were to happen, obviously the Vancouver Canucks would be in a cap dilemma because they would need to move out cap, especially if they were to sign Rossi to a long-term deal. Perhaps if Rossi were to be traded, he might sign a bridge deal for less money, and then go from there. Obviously his asking price is, what was it? 7 years? Where was it? Yeah. 7 years, $49 million. Perhaps if Rossi were to be traded to not only just a team that he'd be willing to play for, but a team that he would know that he would get an opportunity with, perhaps he'd be willing to sign a short-term deal, until at least, the cap. Keep in mind, the cap's going up. So if he signs a short-term deal, and then after that signs a long-term deal, keep in mind, Rossi's only 23 years old. So he's going to have plenty of time to make his money. So that's my take on that. When it comes to this trade pitch, despite my love for Niels Höglander and Aatu Räty, I would absolutely do this trade, and I would, be knocking on Bill Guerin's door and saying, this is what we're offering, give us Marco Rossi. But once again, let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think. And as always, if you guys like this video, be sure to hit that like button. And if you want to stay up to date on all your Vancouver Canucks content, be sure to smash that subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you don't miss a single video. You can find us on social media, as you can see on the screen. You can find us on Facebook. Just search The Line Change to find our Facebook page. Find us on Instagram at The Line Change. Find us on X at Line Change Van. You can find us on TikTok at the TLC Podcast. You can also find us on Blue Sky at The Line Change, and feel free to give us a follow on all of our social media platforms. If you prefer an audio version of this podcast, you can find us on both Spotify and Apple Podcasts. On Spotify, feel free to give us a follow, and as well as rate and review us. It is, of course, greatly appreciated. But that's going to do it for me in this video. As always, let's go Canucks, and I'll see you guys in the next video.